Hello, Gary.
Hello, Guy.
I believe you've dragged yourself out of your sick bed for the sake of our listeners.
I've had flu. I stupidly didn't get a jab. I don't know why. I kept walking past chemists going, I've got to go in and get a jab. But that's kind of for old people. You know, because I am an old person and I should have gone and got a jab, and I've literally suffered.
It's hubris. That's hubris, that is, Gal.
Greatest prog band ever, weren't they?
I think I'm probably on an album. Do you know what I was thinking, right? When we had Francis Rossi on, and it came up about that old adage, how you should always wear clean underpants in case you get hit by a bus.
Oh, yeah.
Well, a friend of mine, Simon London, very funny man, I've got to give him credit. Never mind clean underpants. You should always be very careful of what you put on anyway, because if you do get hit by a bus, that's your ghost outfit forever.
Is actually...
What have you got your Christmas jumper on? You know, you're not going to really be scaring people very much in that, are you?
Which kind of makes me happy, because it means to say that Tommy Cooper has still got his fez on. Which is kind of someone you'd love to see when you get to heaven, right?
Does it go white like Kenneth Coates?
Yes. So today's a special kind of Rockonteurs that we're doing, which is where you've been sending us some questions, and we've got a bunch of them. Our producer Ben has helped,
and we've gone through them and decided they're all rubbish and just made up our own that make us sound really good.
And he's taken off all the insulting ones that might make us cry.
Yes. Well, we had a good old cry before we came on.
So you just bought an axe, you said?
Yeah.
Is that what kind? Is this from Denmark Street? Is this an old 60s SG?
Yeah, it's a 58335, man. No, I actually went to the building shop and I had to buy an axe because, of course, I now live out in the country, and I'm going to chop up an old kitchen unit to use it as kindling because it's beyond saving. But it was very funny. The guy actually said, what do you want it for, sir? And I was going to ask some gaffer tape and plastic sheeting and cable ties as well. But instead, I just said, well, actually, I'm a writer, but I've just got a job looking after a hotel that's closed for the season.
Yes. Of course.
I'm sure most of our listeners will get that reference.
Ghostly twins.
Exactly.
So, okay. Welcome to the Rockonteurs.
Okay, guys, I'm ready.
That's a big tune for sure. I actually wrote that originally for Tina Turner.
Of course, I had gone and found Joni Mitchell down in Florida and brought her back.
I've listened to a few of them and they've been really good, man. I'm sitting in the back of the car coming into London. They're brilliant.
Thank you guys for still being around, still making music, still being into it, and doing this podcast. It's fabulous.
Well, I get the feeling that us three should go for a pint. That's what I think.
I'm in a band now. It's called Roxy Music.
You know this thing about the 10,000 hours of experience?
Oh, yeah.
Get good at something. When we recorded Arnold Lane, we'd done about 50 hours.
The Rockonteurs podcast with Gary Kemp and Guy Pratt.
Keep on rocking!
So, well, it's been quite a year for Rockonteurs, hasn't it, Gal?
Yes, it has. Who we had on? I haven't even got who we've had on in front of me. I should be like whisking through this. Yeah, no, it has. Because I tell you why it's been quite a year, because we've been on tour. We were away for 19 weeks, and much of that we did Rockonteurs through, which was quite interesting, wasn't it? Trying to find Wi-Fi in different hotels in.
Oh yeah, no, we had a couple of very exciting. I remember it was Glasgow, running around a hotel where there was just no functioning Wi-Fi anywhere, and I think you had building going on outside your room, and it was all very scrabbly, last-minute stuff. And I ended up in a boardroom. And then realised, it was 10 minutes in and realised my computer was about to die and the only mains outlet was on the other side of the room. Had to somehow shift my whole operation whilst, not interrupting the interview.
Talking to Neil Finn, I think we were.
No, that wasn't Neil Finn. No, Neil Finn was all right. Do you know what is funny, though, is I put up a tease about our guest this week on Facebook, just said, super producer incoming. And loads of people were people put up guesses of who they think it's going to be. What was slightly annoying was most of the guesses were people who have been on. It's like, keep up, people. There's only, 110 to listen to? What's wrong with you?
I know. When you go back to the beginning, though, we were very different then. I know it's not that long ago. We were younger men.
Well, we were 3 years ago, mate.
Oh, Christ. But we were, those early episodes, maybe just a little bit more stilted. I'd written the questions down, but where
I think it tended to be you were a lot more serious and I was a bit too jokey, perhaps, which is obviously it's a nerves thing. We're finding our way.
Yeah, and we, of course, they all started face to face, didn't they?
That's right. I mean, it's saying how much of a faff it was. You had to find someone who had that time to be somewhere, and we had to go into a studio.
Like going down to Trevor Horn's studio in the middle of, he was recording something, wasn't he? And then we and I think what changed, what made lots of podcasts everywhere what they are, was lockdown. And
you were trying to find the word there, weren't you?
I was trying to find the word. I didn't want to say
this our horrific global pandemic.
I know, that's what I wanted to say, but it was too depressing.
I know.
Because lockdown made everyone more confessional. So that if you go back to the period when we're talking to different artists during that period, it seems that there was a lot more a willingness to open up, and to say things that were maybe a bit more emotional. What they weren't doing is what they are tending to do now, which is promote goods, right?
That's right. No, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Rather than promoting a new record, they were sitting in a room thinking, I'm going to die in here.
So there was a sense of, and also no one had a record out, so when they did start to all bring records out towards at the end of lockdown, I think we found ourselves, also doing interviews that were talking about people's new material.
Yeah.
It's probably why, as much as I like doing younger artists, we had Leanne Caress on, it was fantastic. Miles Kane was on. The older person definitely has a sense of like, I better get this out now while I'm still here.
I think there's also a sense of because when you are a younger artist, your whole life is about right now. Who am I right now? What am I doing right now? As opposed to, I think for this sort of chat, people who are in a reflective frame of mind.
Yeah. Should we have a look at some questions?
No.
Okay. Says good night from me. Where are these questions? Hang on. Ben Jones sent us these questions, and so I have to find. I'm just going to put in a thumb and pull out a plum, as they say. And this is from Frank Jacob. Oh God, it's going to be someone who's got a name I can't pronounce immediately. Frank.
Get Siri to say it.
Jakubowicz. Who's Jakubowicz? Who says, "Who do you most wish you had the chance to see perform live, but never did?" I guess is what he's saying.
That's a good point, isn't it? I think I sort of saw everyone I've wanted to see. Probably Hendrix.
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, not many people actually did see Hendrix in the UK, did they? I mean, he wasn't like permanently touring, was he?
No, probably he did quite a lot, but that's always anyone who was there. Pete Townsend always talks about it, says it was literally like being in the presence of a shaman.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, then I suppose you can start saying Frank Sinatra for me, because I never saw Frank. And then
Charlie Parker, exactly. So
Charlie Parker, but I mean, in reality,
actually, no, you're right. Yeah. You're someone who we should limit it. Someone we could have seen.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it would have been Mark Bolan. I never saw Mark Bolan play. I was young at the time, so it was one of my first loves. And then, as I said before, Slade was the band that I first got into and first saw live. But I think I would have liked it. Yeah, I'd love to have seen Mark, because I think Mark had that presence, and I guess I am then, if you do want to take one step back, quite envious of those people we've had on who talk about, like Peter Asher said about going down to the UFO club and seeing, Mark on his rug, cross-legged, doing his thing, with his corkscrew hair.
Yeah.
But this was the great face, but yeah, never got to see him.
This is where that thing of you just being 2 years older than me. I said this is something that becomes really interesting, which is meaningless. No, but it's meaningless now. But in the music, to do with the music we listened to and saw and everything when we were younger, it does create this, vast crowd. I never saw The Who with Keith Moon.
Oh,
yeah,
wow. I mean, I saw them 3 times. With Keith. So they did 2 nights at Hammersmith Odeon, or maybe they were on separate occasions. I can't remember. I went with my brother to all of them, because that was the other thing. I ended up having to take my brother everywhere, because if I'd be 15, he'd be 13. So that was always a slight drag for me. So he gets to see all these, these acts quite young. We went to see them at Hammersmith Odeon.
And you went to
and of course,
Charlton.
Charlton, you know, and I'm going to say it again. Because Charlton was extraordinary gig. It was quite a disgusting place because I do remember sort of people throwing bags of piss over their heads in plastic bags, sort of because no one could be bothered to go or couldn't reach the toilets. Because, I mean, facilities in those days at an open air show are not like they are
Yeah. It was
today.
a burger van. And
of course, there were no screens as well. So if you were at the back of Charlton,
that's right,
they were all tiny.
Yeah, good luck, mate. Do you know what the worst? I'll tell you the worst is when the last shows they did, when they did Shepperton, for the Kids Are All Right. Yeah, they put it on Capital Radio that any Who fans get down. So it was the Kilburn Gaumont, in fact, the Kilburn Gaumont. And my mate Anthony, who you met in Brussels, as my school friend, he, of course, back then I was just out, and he heard it. And he ran around and he went to everywhere we used to go. He went to Shaw's, the local department shop with a record department. He went to Sundown Records on the Lower Marsh. He went to everywhere where he thought I might be, and he couldn't find me. So he just went on his own.
Oh, no, you missed that.
I missed it, yeah.
They were amazing live. Live Aid, Pete said to me, and he knew I was a fan, and he said, look, you stick with me. We walk up on the side of the stage when I go up to do Live Aid. And I walked with Pete, and I stood on John's side of the stage as Pete walked across.
Your poor ears.
I swear, all it was bass going through my chest. But I realised what the power chord that Pete was famous for really was. Pete would do the yagadang, of course, but it was all the treble. But the thump was the dum that John would play on the bass. And of course, I hadn't played for 8 years, but it was with Kenny, who's been one of our guests as well.
Exactly, yeah, a fabulous guest he was too. That's why I would have loved to. The Small Faces, man, would have loved to have seen them in their pomp.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? To be when you say in their pomp, what you really mean is at that moment when it was crystallising.
Yes, yeah.
So
when it was literally being made up
in a small Soho club.
Yeah,
like to see Sid and the Floyd in the UFO would have been ridiculously amazing and unforgettable, as Peter Asher told us it was, and a few other guests we've had on.
Yeah, although I would point out that I went to see Pink Floyd do The Wall at Earl's Court, both years, 79 and 80, or 1881, whatever it was. And it's still the best thing I've ever seen.
Extraordinary piece of theatre.
Yeah. Apart from Sweeney Todd by Sondheim, which I saw 13 times.
Did you?
I did.
What is it that makes you want to go and see it again and again?
I don't know. There was something, I don't know. It was so in tune with the sort of punk ethos of the time. It was all Dickensian and about the injustice of society,
Yeah, but also fantastic
tunes,
music and lyrics.
Tunes, mate. Come on.
Have you got one you can read out?
Mark Jones says, I've listened to every episode and David Coverdale is my standout favourite. Well, that's a big tune for sure. What are your most memorable moments so far?
Do you know Mick Fleetwood was the moment when Mick says, and of course it's even sadder now because this can't happen, that he just said he knew and he hoped that one day all the original 5 members would, post Peter Green obviously, would walk onto the stage together as Fleetwood Mac. Yeah. And there was a tear in his eye. He started getting choked up.
Yeah. I was, well, it's not really that, I remember it probably because it was so recent, but when Andrew Luke Oldham dropped, he was at school with Nick Mason. And then there's a bit of me that thinks, how the hell didn't I know that? And then there's the worrying thing of maybe I did know that. Yeah. But then you think, where's the conversation where Nick says that? I went to a crammer with Andrew Luke Oldham.
It's kind of fascinating, though, isn't it? That in the same room together was the guy who was going to basically invent the Rolling Stones and the guy who was going to make Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, do you know what? I really liked Roland Orsable's interview that we did. I always feel weird saying interviews. They're not really interviews.
No, they're chats.
They were chats, really. I think there was a moment when, he was definitely talking about his relationship with his fellow band member, Kirk, and just, I think that he got quite emotional about that. So I suppose I think what we have, I'm hoping what we have is we're sort of not that interview, journalistic type interviewer who can be a little, where I know what it's like when I'm being interviewed. I'm on my guard. I've got prepared lines, and there's only so much I can give and want to say. But I think if you're talking to fellow musicians and people who you think are your friends,
well, it's quite funny.
They desert you.
Yeah, I've had to learn interviewing in the last sort of 50, because it was only when I started doing my comedy, doing stand-up, that I started getting interviewed by anyone other than kind of Bass Player magazine. And it's quite funny because you would have learnt this very, very early on, Gary, the thing of boundaries, of like the reason you have to have prepared lines so that you know what not to say.
Exactly.
For everyone's sake.
Exactly. Otherwise you can't go back into the rehearsal room.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different types of guests that you've got the kind of, I remember Noel Gallagher being on and Johnny Marr being on, very, very relaxed guys, and easy chatting, not worried about, chatting about their relationship with their nemesis that have become, like Morrissey and Liam.
Well, Nemesi, is that?
Nemesi, yes. And then you've got the opposite of that, which is sort of, John Bon Jovi and Alice Cooper, who were very, very well presented.
Yeah. Can I just tell a little story, though? You mentioned Noel Gallagher. Can I just say, I have never been so scared of doing a Rockonteurs as when we were going to do Noel Gallagher, who was one of the most delightful, charming people we've ever spoken to. But that is not his rep, right? And so I want to point out that I was so scared, a few days before he came on, I actually texted Johnny Marr to say, hey, we're getting Noel on, do you think he'll be all right? And he was going, oh man, Noel's a brother, it'll be fantastic, guy, but great. And I literally sent that in the hope that Johnny was going to text Noel and say, go easy on them, guys, all right.
They might be southern softies.
Yeah, exactly. Might be soft southern shite.
There is a moment, isn't there, when we're waiting for a guest, and because we do most of our interviews now on Zoom, obviously, virtually all of them, that we're waiting for our guests to appear on our monitor in front of us. And that can be quite terrifying, can't it? You're not quite sure what they're going to look like. I remember when JJ Burnell came on and he was wearing his sunglasses, wasn't he? And he just looked really fierce. And I think it took him about an hour to get to like us, didn't it, really?
But that is a funny thing you say that, which is why, if you notice on all our intros, because there's always a slight thing of, maybe they're not going to turn up, or maybe and so the interview always starts with "Yay, there you are, woo, yeah," and our guests are greeted like a liberating army.
Next question. What have I got? Okay, John Gehring on Twitter asks, "Is there more to come from NMSFOS?" Okay, so I think he means NMSOS.
Nick Mason's Sourceful of Secrets. Yeah.
He's split Sourceful into two words there. Is there any more to come?
Are you an English teacher, John?
We can't say, can we, if there's more to come?
We can't say. Can I also just point this out as something that happens on social media a lot, which is that if you ever say you're doing a gig somewhere, like I'm doing a little In Conversation thing in Amsterdam next week, and someone goes, any dates planned for Brisbane? Why aren't you coming to Brisbane? Come to Brazil. Or it's always come in Brazil. And people should realise that if I say, or if anyone says, like with Sourceful of Secrets, oh yeah, are you doing any Australian dates? If we go yes, then we've just announced a tour. You can't announce a tour by replying to someone on Facebook. So I wish people would realise that there's no point asking that question.
So there you are. So basically, you're telling John there's no point asking this question.
Exactly.
I think fair enough to say that we...
No, I'm not saying... No, because the question is there more to come? And we would dearly hope there's more to come.
We dearly hope there's more to come. There's no end to this yet.
So there you
go. But we have given 20 weeks or something of
our lives
this year alone.
Yeah.
to we're doing a fantastic tour, playing Echoes. What a joy every night. I mean, wow. That if anything's going to ever keep me on my toes. They say when you get to our age, we should do the crossword, to keep your brain alive. The other thing is you should also do Echoes.
That's true. The doctors have started prescribing it.
Go on, you ask one guy.
All right. Jeff Wilson emailed to ask if Gary ever happened to catch the Sex Pistols at the Screen on the Green. Yes, I've often wondered this, Gary.
Funny you should ask that. I did. Am I going to really do this again? I don't want to because I did. Yes, of course I did. Change my life.
Thanks, Jeff.
Good.
Nice one, Jeff. Top marks, Jeff.
Yeah. It should have been a question of me asking you, really.
Yes.
Yes.
That would hurt too much.
I'll find one now for you. Okay, so I've got one for you. Penny, she hasn't put a second name. Penny asks you, Guy, you say you don't actually recall your performance on Like a Prayer. Are there other recordings that you realised you'd overlooked or frankly realised were more complex than expected when you've revisited them?
Yeah, there's lots of actual live performances and recordings. I don't tend to not really remember. I remember all the stuff around them. It's quite a funny thing that I don't know if that's a sort of going into a zone. But when you say things are more complex when you revisit them, during lockdown, as well as doing this, I was doing those lockdown licks, right, where I was showing people how I played bass on various records. And what was brilliant about that was going back to things I hadn't played for 30 years and something. And it's like having a conversation with your younger self. Huh. And anything past a certain time was just like, oh, yeah, it's this guy. I know this guy. But what was really interesting for me was like doing things like Ice House songs, like the first album I ever worked on. And you're literally having to remember who this person is. I don't know if you get that, Gary, with very early stuff. That's like, I had to think about what I was doing, why I did, and there's stuff you think, oh God, I wish I still did that.
Yeah, because you change your style, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you've grown and
well,
changed.
you become a person, don't you? You kind of, and then, Sources has definitely changed because the majority of what I play the last few years has been kind of, rock music with a pick, and it does change you.
Yeah, but also, I suppose when you in those early days when you were recording, you would have been trying to copy someone else, wouldn't you? And so you hadn't found who Guy was yet.
Yeah, and it's everything's ego driven as well, isn't it? When you're a kid, which is terrible for a bass player.
I think one of the best things someone did ask, and I can't see where their name is, but someone asked what my favourite bass part that you play on is.
Oh.
And I think it's Sorrow.
Oh, okay. But that's not actually my line. Is
it not your line? That's why I like it.
That's why you like it. It was actually David on a bass synth.
But on Pulse Live?
But I do. It is one of the Pink Floyd things I do feel very much a sort of ownership of.
Why is that?
Because I kind of made it my own. I mean, it's very brilliant. Different to how David played it. But I think that was kind of what was more that's actually that part was the inspiration for Earth Song by Michael Jackson. That sort of lumbering. Yeah. Do you know my favourite? I mean, there's lots of your stuff. I particularly like the guitar on Through the Barricades. I really love the way you play the riff on I'll Fly For You.
Oh, thank you very much. I suppose, those early 80s stuff really, or that mid-80s stuff, that was all Nile Rodgers influenced,
Yeah.
Yeah, and wanting to get that transparent, Fendery type guitar sound, and yeah. Okay, this is from Mark Tibbles, who wants to know who threw the best after-show parties.
Well, I'm going to tell you something, right? For a start, obviously Pink Floyd threw the best after-show parties because they were insane. And in fact, there was a time we used to be followed around Europe by Prince Rupert Lowenstein, who, the Stones manager at the time, who was hustling for the Pink Floyd gig. And so he used to throw these parties that no one really knew about. And he'd sort of at Versailles and places without anyone knowing. But I remember was it 1986, you played at Wembley Arena, Gary, and I think you played for 5 nights or 6 nights, and you had a party at the Holiday Inn Swiss Cottage every night. And I went to see you. I went to see you at Wembley once, and it was great. But I think I went to the party 4 nights running.
Hang on, are you sure you just didn't stay there?
Probably.
For 4 nights.
Well, I only lived around the corner at the time. So.
But what about Madonna? Didn't you ever go to a Madonna party? You must have gone to Madonna.
No, I haven't actually. No, I only, not an after-show party. I once got taken into an inner sanctum to meet her before a gig, which I find weird because the Stones do this as well, don't they? Where you, when you go and see the Stones, if you know someone in the band, we went to see and to meet up with my dear pal Chuck Leavell, and they have a whole pre-show thing
They do, yeah.
Because they're just like, yeah. And then some people will be around in the hotel after. I don't want to see anyone before a show. I mean, I just don't want to see anyone at all.
No, we always, well, apart from the band, obviously.
Well, yeah.
Me.
Well, I haven't got much choice there.
But the Stones ones are like, it's like a giant sort of bullseye almost. It's like, there's the outer circle bit where Charlie, well, no, you've got Chuck Leavell maybe hovering on the outer circle. Then if you go into, you get invited into the next layer, don't you? You've got Charlie.
What are you saying?
You did have.
What do you mean on the outer? What are you saying here?
But because it is because it's basically you go deeper and deeper. You until you've got like there's Mick. And then finally, there's an inside room, and it's Keith playing pool, isn't it? You know,
I like his whole dressing room bit was called Camp X-Ray, wasn't it?
No one ever gets to Keith, though, do they? You'll always.
I did have a look in his little dressing room, and he had a shrine with Jerry Lee Lewis and sort of Jerry Lee Lewis, and sort of candles and incense and everything. It's weird.
Amazing. I've told this story before because when John Taylor was on, I think, but about talking about parties. And I remember we were doing a TV show or a gig or something in Ibiza, and it was a special event thing, and Duran were playing on it too. I think it had something to do with the Olympics.
Yes. It was. I remember because my girlfriend at the time went out to it. I didn't. She did. Oof.
And we arrived and we were told, oh, there's a party at Roman Polanski's house, which of course we all went to, and we went. And we're at this party, and Steve Dagger, who managed Spandau Ballet, had got a call. A butler came and said, "There's a call for you, Mr. Dagger. Mr. Dagger, there's a call for Mr. Dagger." So Steve ends up finding this telephone, and it's the local airport, and air traffic control have had a message from a private plane that's coming in to land, carrying Duran, and it says, Duran wants to know if you're going out. They'd actually bothered air traffic control in Ibiza. Oh, we said, well, we are out. We gave them the address and they turned up.
Yeah, and you made sure you'd left by the time they got there, obviously.
Of course. It was rubbish.
Do you know what I think probably the best after-show party I've ever been to? I went to a Wall one night. That was pretty mad. I was caught. But it was when The Who did their star-studded performance of Tommy at the Universal Amphitheatre in LA in 1989. And the party afterwards was a full old 1950s British fun fair. Literally, Ferris wheel, Big Dipper.
I went to that. That rings a bell.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Yeah, maybe I was there.
Fish and chip vans everywhere.
Yes, I was there. Yes, fabulous.
I didn't see you.
No, I was avoiding you. I was dressed differently.
So there's been a few people asking how Gary and I first met. And this actually kind of came up in the Andrew Loog Oldham thing, which is that we were sort of nodding acquaintances at parties throughout the 80s. But we met properly several years before we became friends because I was so enamoured of Steve Dagger, the manager. That's because I knew John Keeble a little bit because I was very good friends with his sister-in-law.
Drummer in Spandau, yeah.
Yeah. But Gary and I first met when the band I was in, Ice House, did apparently co-headliner for a big German TV company, although it was actually a mime thing, in an arena in Budapest in 1984.
Yes. Didn't you get an ear infection and have to go to hospital? I
got a terrible ear infection and got sent off. I'd had an ear infection before, so I'd been sent off to some insane, sanatorium outside of town to see a doctor. It was terrible. It's all documented in my book. It's very funny. But I'd been given this ridiculous amount of painkillers and stuff, really hardcore stuff, which I shared with Spandau Ballet. I think, Gary, you demurred very wisely because the evening did end up with John Keeble, your drummer, being sick in an ashtray.
Oh, you see, that's it, you see.
Yeah.
Because I always demur and John Keeble always ends up last, sick in an ashtray. We had a big face-off party once with Duran, where we were doing a TV in Germany, and it was the night before recording the Band Aid record. Actually, it was the first time we'd ever been together in a bar in a hotel since we played up in Birmingham in 1980, and so we knew it was going to be a bit of a drink off. And what was really upsetting was that John Keeble got so overexcited, he came too soon and he got stretchered off before the Twiglets even arrived. I mean, once you'd lost your star player, I knew it was all over. I think it ended up with Martin and John Taylor in one or the other's hotel room, both with their own personal security guards standing behind them while they sat and tried to stay up as long as they possibly could. I'm sure they had all the help they needed.
But yeah, the night we met, we ended up in a hotel room. Though you did stay up quite late, because I remember I was with you and Martin and your dresser or your wardrobe person, who'd been sort of, I don't know, stung in Malaga. Had a terrible breakup with someone, and and that's where the
Portuguese man of war
didn't seem in uniform. But we became friends when Steve Dagger asked when Gary was going to do his first solo album, and Steve Dagger asked me to help and put a band together for you. And and the irony of all that being was that. And it was brilliant. You had all these great songs. You had a great little band, and went and demoed them all. And then you went to make the album, and I went off on tour with Pink Floyd. So I ended up playing on one song on your album.
You did, but I remember that rehearsal. We had a rehearsal at Nomis Studios, which was everyone rehearsed at Nomis Studios in those days. And I remember the band being set up, and who walked in?
Oh, Pete.
Pete Townsend walked in, and he went, "At last, you got a fucking guitar around your neck." Because I'd been doing some acting stuff, hadn't I?
That's right, yeah.
And I've never forgot that. And I was very, very glad that he said that. It inspires me whenever I've not got a fucking guitar around my neck.
Yeah, well, the irony being that it inspired us to go off and write a musical together. So you actually took the guitar off, put on your sleeveless jumper and got your pens in your pocket.
Yes, Sweeney.
Right. Beth Wilson asks, we watched The Bodyguard again last night, which is 30 years old this year. Was Cy Spectre as fun to play as it seems, and why does the film still hold its own 3 decades later?
Well, I suppose it's a really good film. I mean, it's got, it's a thriller, and is it dated now? I don't know. I haven't watched it for so long.
Everything's dated. Everything's dated.
Fantastic vocal performance from Whitney and an acting performance from Whitney. I mean, I remember being in Miami when she shot. I was sitting in the ballroom in the Fontainebleau Hotel, and she is about to, as the character, sing one of the songs at a show, and the backing track began, and she sang "I Will Always Love You." And I mean, talk about the goosebumps experience and all of that. What a moment! And you just thought, well, that's it now. This film is a hit, but why didn't they use one of my songs? That's always been my biggest regret. No, I think the film's. I mean, it's a great scriptwriter, good director, and it's a classic. It's almost like it could have been Cary Grant and Doris Day or something, couldn't it? Really, it could have been one. It's written in that vein. Okay, there's one for you. This is from M Brabs on Twitter, or Brabs. Could Guy talk about his experience playing with Bowie on his last live show in the UK when he guested with David Gilmour?
Well, you'll like this, Gal, because it's about Bowie. First it was actually his penultimate ever gig, and it was his last proper gig. It was his last public gig, because the only gig he ever did after that was some charity thing in New York. And it was because Nick Belshaw, our tour manager, was Bowie's production manager. And he was in touch with him and everything. And Bowie just happened to be in London. I think he was showing his daughter and Iman around his childhood haunts and everything. And I think Nick just said, "Shall I ask Bowie to come down and sing?" And we just went, "Yeah, sure, all right, yeah, ha ha, like that's going to happen." And then next thing we just like, yeah, he said yes, he's coming. And so it's like, so that's why we decided to do Arnold Lane, and then Comfortably Numb. What was amazing was when he sang Arnold Lane, what was so lovely about that was that he knew that song inside, outside, upside down. It's like he'd been singing it every night for his whole life. That's how much he loved Sid. Comfortably Numb, I don't think he really knew at all. But but David said, no, we've got to have him doing the verses. And the funny thing is that David had to bully and cajole and push Rick into singing the verses for Comfortably Numb, which he eventually did, magnificently. But then he didn't want to give them up. Now he got used to doing it. We're going, but it's David. No, well, I sing the verses. It's David Bowie, Rick. And in the end, there's some great photos of David, Rick, and Bowie rehearsing together.
I've seen that.
And so it was just, magnificent when he came. Of course, the funny, my favourite story about it is that I have a picture from 1983 when I was on tour with Icehouse, and Bowie came to see it because we were about to support Bowie. And he came to see us. And I ended up with Bowie and his band grabbing hold of me and saying, you need to be in this, when he was getting papped. So I've got a picture of me and Bowie, and I'm standing there pointing at myself with this ridiculous, who, me, expression. And we did all these sort of team pictures after sound check with all the guests, with Robert Wyatt and David Crosby and Bowie, everyone happened to be there on the day. And I was writing my book at the time. So afterwards, I pulled Bowie aside and just said, David, look, I hope you don't mind, but I'd kind of like to recreate a picture you and I had taken back in 1983. He went, all right. So stood next to him, Brian Racek, the photographer, goes to take the picture. And I pulled the same expression I'd had back in 1983. And Bowie went, I remember that picture. I said, no, you don't. He went, yeah, Icehouse, Germany, 1983. What? That is amazing. And he said, I was wearing this scarf. Oh my God, that's it. So I rushed home, found the picture, took out the picture, and complete bollocks. He wasn't wearing a scarf at all.
He's such a joker.
Yeah. But he did remember the picture. And he was also, the one thing I will say, because the last time I played at the Albert Hall with David, we actually had Benedict Cumberbatch come up and do Comfortably
I saw
Numb.
that. Yeah, I was there.
But the one bit of advice I gave Benedict, I said, once you've done your second verse, okay, as soon as David starts a guitar solo, just leave.
Well, because that was going to be my question. Did Bowie stay on stage?
Bowie did stay, and literally Bowie is the only person who ever lived who was cool enough to actually manage to stand next to David for 5 minutes while that's because there's just no point being there.
What I would have loved to have seen was for Bowie to have got on his knees and played David's guitar with his teeth.
Oh, yes.
Oh, good for him. God bless him. We miss him.
We do miss him. Yeah, but I will just say that was just beyond magical. And you know what? And it also actually made me rethink Arnold Lane, because I'd never really thought about the line "two to know," and which of course means the protagonist, the Sid character, has perhaps done something similar himself. And when Bowie sang it, he held up two fingers that looked like a peace sign, meaning whenever he sang "two to know." And on the Source Full of Secrets tour, I've actually worked out a way of playing the bass where I can have open strings on the two moments. So I copy Bowie and hold up my hands.
Yeah.
When he does the "two to know."
I'm not looking at you at that point.
No, the audience never pick up on it, but I'm going to keep doing it.
But I think it's worth saying, because I've said this before. In fact, I've said everything before.
Christ, have you?
Yes. But there wouldn't have been Bowie and Ziggy if it hadn't been for Sid.
No,
that look, that particular London elfin, rather louche kind of character that Sid was, that Bowie wanted to be and became, and obviously told us that when he did See Emily Play on the Pin-Ups album.
Yeah. But also that whole thing of an English way of singing that wasn't Anthony Newley.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there was, I think that must have been it was a wonderful moment watching Bowie do that song on stage, because it was, he's always been very open about his influences. I think Pin-Ups is one of the great albums, but you look at it now and you say, wow, some strange choices that must have been for a young person like me. I'd never even heard of most of those bands that he was covering at that time.
Well, also things like when he revealed, you didn't realise what an absolute proto-rock record Can't Explain was until Bowie did it and showed you what it was. That's all the questions we've got time for.
Yes, but there is this final thought from someone that was, what has Rockonteurs taught us? What do we think of doing this show? Because when we first started out, it was just an excuse to have, me and you hang out and chat with someone that we liked.
Well, one does feel a slight mantle of responsibility now, because it has become there was someone put up a thing on Twitter the other day saying you should listen to Rockonteurs because it is literally the oral history of rock music.
I think it's a bit like, when the World at War documentary series, where they were interviewing all the old soldiers, talking about the past. And I couldn't imagine a place that existed quite as incredible as the period that was Europe in World War II. And in a way, a lot of our listeners think, we're even us, because we're young, compared to the gods. What an amazing time it must have been to be inventing rock music in the Western world during the 60s.
Well, just that whole that whole generational excitement. So the thing that I don't like, well, not what that I don't like, but that does worry me a bit, which is that thing, because what I do love about the show is the fact that we've never ever had a guest on where I haven't learnt something. Even like someone like Nick.
Okay, thank you. We're going to be still making this happen throughout the next year.
We are, because amazingly, because what came from just scrabbling around our address books. So we've got always eternally grateful, by the way, to those first few people who said yes to us, who had no idea what they were letting themselves in for. And we're big enough names to give us a leg up to keep going.
Yeah, I think we'd also, we're toying with the idea of doing this live, aren't we, at some point?
We're
trying to get it out there.
We'd love to do this live.
So, that's a thought we're putting out there into the ether.
And hopefully it's just onwards and upwards for us and all of us.
Good night from me.
And good night from them.